Welcome to the K-12 Change podcast by Ed Elements. I'm Mort Sherman. I'm the co-host with Leah Newland, who is off on a conference this week, and we're honored to welcome Mike Lubelfeld, who serves as our guest co-host of the podcast. This is his second run at this. Mike, you and I had, I thought, a great conversation last week with Keith Kruger from COSIN. And I think it sets up really well the conversation I'm hoping to have with you and with Nick today about change, about leadership, about the world around us. So let's dig right in. But let us start, Mike, by giving you a moment to introduce yourself, and then we'll let Nick introduce himself. But I had a flashback of memory this morning, the first time I met the two of you. Do you guys remember? It was in Morristown, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Can we say at a bar? Late at night. Yeah, Dan Dominique said, hey, I want to have you meet these two guys. And I met the two of you. And I think it was instant friendship, mutual respect, great admiration at the time. And we've been friends and we've hung out together and we've done great work together. And the two of you have kind of been my go-to folks when I was at ASA. So as I let you introduce yourself, Mike, I have to thank the two of you because I had a contract with Mississippi, of all wonderful places. And Mississippi asked if we could create an aspiring superintendents program. And I said, I know these two remarkable superintendents from Illinois. And they said, Illinois? This is Mississippi. And I said, these guys are so good. These are so good that they could play anywhere. And you went down to Mississippi and did a wonderful job. And I want to thank you for that. And you helped them launch their program and get many superintendents in Mississippi off the ground. And you've continued that over the years in Illinois. And the second time I really got to know you well was when you were both in a certification program in Alexandria. Mike Hinojosa was our instructor. And if you remember, Mike said, don't tell anybody, but he just got reappointed to Dallas. And what a wonderful gig to be asked back the second time as a superintendent. And he had a wonderful run there. So we have a long-standing, really positive professional and personal relationship. Mike, why'd you take a moment to introduce yourself?
Mort, thank you so much. Thanks for letting me come back to be the guest co-host. Layla, thank you out in the universe as well. This is a great podcast. Mort, you're a guardian angel, a trusted mentor, coach, guide, and friend, and confidant, and you're a person that has created conditions and opportunities for me and Nick, Nick and I, Nick, whatever, both of us, to lead. I'm in my 16th and final year as a public school superintendent full-time in the state of Illinois. I'm about to finish my 8th year here at North Shore School District 112 in Highland Park in Highwood, Illinois. Been an assistant superintendent, middle school administrator, social studies teacher, most importantly, a husband to Stephanie and father to Maya and Justin. Thanks to you, have been able to travel the world and do incredible things and really help leadership. Like you, I'm looking forward to my next chapters. So thanks for letting me be here today. I cannot wait to talk with our buddy, Nick Polyak.
Nick, your turn to introduce yourself. And by the way, Mike, the phrase is being repurposed when you leave the job. It's not retiring. People like you and Nick and I and others, we can't let go of service. We just have to repurpose the work we do. Nick, your turn to introduce yourself.
Well, good morning, Mort. It's always good to see you, my friend. And I'll echo Mike and say, I appreciate the kind words, but boy, you've opened up amazing opportunities and doors for us across the country and across the world. And we just appreciate the friendship and the trust you've put in us to do those fun things. I mean, we spent a lot of time down in Biloxi and in Jackson, Mississippi, met some amazing people. So thank you for that always. I'm very blessed to be married to my wife, Kate, for 25 years. We have 4 great kids. They're all doing fun things. Super proud of them. I've been a school superintendent in Illinois for 17 years. This is my 13th year in my current district, which is Leiden Community High School District. And we're a really cool, diverse school district right between O'Hare Airport and Chicago, Illinois. And just love what I get to do every day. So thanks for letting me be here today.
So, Mike, let us start with, as my guest co-host, with a question for both of you. But I'd like you to kind of kick it off, Mike, and lead part of a conversation with Nick. I'm so fascinated by the times we live in. Both of you are still sitting superintendents. Mike, you are going to retire this year, which gives you a whole different perspective on the world. I can't imagine being in the seat today. I mean, I can imagine it, but it just seems so different than when I retired in 2013 from Alexandria City Public Schools as a superintendent after 25 years in the number of districts. And so I'm just curious, just the historical perspective. Both of you have been around for a while. What have you seen as changes? And you know, Nick, where that's going to go. And therefore, after the changes, what have you had to unlearn in order to succeed? So, Mike, let's start with you. Some of the changes that you've seen in the years you've been in service in the seat as a superintendent.
So it's interesting. Thank you, Mort. I've got the before COVID, the BC, the during COVID DC, and the after COVID AC. And I'm going to tip my hat to Michael Connor, another member of our superintendent fraternity and crew, a former superintendent. I have seen the differences when education was, let's just say, unknown. During the COVID experiences, we public school, private school, independent school folks, whether we were fully in person during the time, partially in person and hybrid, or completely remote, all of the above, we opened our doors and our hearts and our classrooms to the living rooms, kitchens, and dining rooms of the society. So I've noticed that change of some people said, gosh, this is really neat. I love what education is. Other people said, I don't love what education is. Then after COVID, you've had different types of discourse around these United States. And we've had different elections locally and nationally. And we've had a different way that people approach their locally elected school boards. Here in Illinois, we primarily have 7-member boards. There's a few 5-member. We know on the East Coast, there's 9-member boards. So what have I seen? I've seen an erosion of civility from some adults in the political process. I've seen a renewed passion and heartfelt calling of our educators, who I will call heroes, teachers, educational support staff, administrators. And I've seen the collective of us scratching our chins and saying, it's been 40 years since a nation at risk. Are we still at risk? Have we made some changes? And I see 70 plus years since the Brown versus Board of Education. Are we desegregated? Are we integrated? And I see us right now at an inflection point in 2025, the first quarter of this century complete, 3 quarters before us. And what I see today is a tremendous need to unlearn. I also see nothing has changed about the value, beauty, sanctity, and hope and sacred calling education is. It is the hope, and we will have the promise of a good future because of what we do. So that'll be my response to you today, sir.
That's a wonderful answer, Nick. I think it sets up the question then about, as you've been in the seat and as you look at this inflection point about unlearning, what have you had to change in your thinking about being a superintendent, being a leader, that calling that Mike shared with us?
I think in year 17, if I try to compare and contrast year 1 and year 17, obviously year 1, I had no idea what I was doing. Year 17, I maybe know what I'm doing, but we're living in a world that is changing so quickly. And the world that our kids are growing up in is so radically different than the world that we grew up in. And so having to grapple with, how do you lead an organization, for me of 600, 700 adults, trying to provide a relevant education for a group of kids entering a world that's different than the world we experienced. It means that unlearning is inherent in the process, because we can't do education the way it was done to us. Otherwise, we're going to be completely missing the mark for our students. So when Mike talks about the role and about the changes in the world, the amount of politics that have come into the world of education have changed the game. The whether we're having to talk about what books are in our library, or who gets to use which bathrooms and which locker rooms, or insert the issue of the day. I don't remember the highly politicized aspects of education like we experience today. And so that's been a place for us to unlearn. What's our place? Do we make grand statements on things? Do we simply follow the law? Do we poll the community and say, which direction do you want us to go? It's really different and contextual everywhere you go.
Nick, I remember a conversation with you at the beginning of COVID, and we talked about school districts closing. And you shared something with me at that time that was like, I could have had a VH. Oh my God, how did I think of that? Where you said, for you going virtually, it was not a huge shift because you had prepared the snow days question about virtual at home, so you didn't lose education. Can you share that? And then for both of you, it's like, okay, now that you've unlearned, you've relearned, you've dislearned, whatever the phrase, but both of you have been able to see around the corner. You know what I mean? You've been able to get a sense of what's coming up. Nick, would you tell that story? You know what I'm talking about from years ago?
Yeah. I mean, there was a snow day. There was a really, really cold day in Illinois where we closed school for the weather. And I was in the office and I was on Twitter actually at the time, even before it was X. And I saw a superintendent in Indiana posting about their e-learning day. I said, boy, that's fascinating. I wonder what that's all about. So I direct messaged him and we were on the phone with each other a few minutes later. And he ended up sharing with me some legislation they got passed to do e-learning days in the state of Indiana. We then brought that to a legislator in Illinois, and through a whole bunch of committee meetings and traveling to the Capitol, we got a pilot finally produced where 3 school districts in Illinois could do e-learning days instead of snow days. And so we dipped our toe in that water and started to see what it looks like to do teaching and learning in a virtual setting. And the idea was, if we can continue education on those days, we thought that was better than just stapling a day onto the end of the school year, which ended up being kind of a throwaway day. So let's play in this space. And so, we had been doing that for a few years when COVID happened. So we had a better on-ramp, I think, to virtual learning. Now, it didn't prepare us in any way, shape, or form. Nobody was ready for that. But at least our folks knew what it was like to post lessons online for kids and track their work in that way. And we could adapt that into what eventually became our COVID model.
So Mike, you and Nick have led the Illinois Aspiring Program. We talked about the Mississippi program. How do you prepare leaders for what you both described is leadership change over these 16, 17 years that you've both been in the seat, and to see around the corner the way Nick just described it? What do you say to these aspiring leaders?
Well, we say things that you've taught us and that other folks have taught us along the way, and that is, what are your core values? And it's not a superficial, what are your core values? Let's process in a thoughtful thought leader session. What are your core values? Not the core values that I think my mother wants me to have. Not the core values that I think the school board thinks I should have. Not the core values I want to tell my wife I have, but the actual core values that I live and breathe. And at the root cause, at the center of the circle, so to speak, of know thyself, which, is the underpinning, the foundation of the curriculum for these leadership programs, you be you. And regardless of what change sits in front of you or sits at the right or left of the roads, that Robert Frost so eloquently penned, decades ago, your core values will be the lighthouse that guides your way. Now, in addition to that, build a coalition, because the role shouldn't be lonely. And those who operate in these leadership roles, whether you're a CEO of a company or a school district, whether you're large, whether you're small, if you think you're alone, you won't be in the seat for 17 consecutive years, 16, 25, so on and so forth. Build that coalition and ask for help. So we encourage them to lean on the state affiliate of the AASA, the national AASA, other groups and other associations. Ask questions. Quick point. Dr. Brent Clark, Executive Director of the Illinois Association of School Administrators, another guardian angel and superstar leader, he assembled a task force of leaders all around Illinois, and we helped get through, one way or another, the entirety of the pandemic: leadership, clarity, lack of leadership, lack of clarity, and education. So we say, know thyself, build a coalition, and ask for help.
Nick, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think I'm going to mix my metaphors a little bit here, but one of the things I've said over the years is part of my business card shouldn't say superintendent, but it should say horizon watcher. If you think about a pirate ship and the crow's nest way up high on the mast, what's the purpose of the person up there? They're up there to be able to see out further. The people on the deck of the ship can't see what's 2 miles down the road, but you put somebody up there to watch out there and say, where are we going? How do we steer away from the iceberg and the other ships and whatever? And so I think that's part of our role, is to take a further view, to know where we're steering this thing. And the mixed metaphor, you mentioned kind of looking around the corner. Part of that is being willing to try and do before you ask others to. So, a nod to Mike, he is taking a leadership role statewide, nationally in terms of artificial intelligence. He's playing with every toy and tool and resource out there, so that he can come back and say, I've already done, and here's what you can do with this. But he's gone around the corner and then bringing the information back to his people. And I think that's a really important model for how we need to lead, because otherwise things just happen to us. So we have to get up high and look out. We got to go around the corner and try and do to know where we're taking our people.
When my second superintendency was in South Orangetown, New York, and Rockland County, and a guy named Micah Snado, Pearl River, right next to where I was, eventually won the Baldridge Award, called me my very first day in the job and said, let's go to lunch. And I said, great, when? He said, well, today or tomorrow. And I said, my calendar's full. He said, clear it, because you can't do this job without talking to a neighbor, to a friend. And it's what you two were just saying. And I have tried to, pay it forward to always assure that those connections are made. So is part of your advice when you both talk to aspiring leaders or existing leaders, is to build that coalition, call your neighbor, call the new superintendent?
It is. And Mort, for a shameless self-plug, being a guest co-host, in our latest book, Leading for Tomorrow's Schools Today, Bloomsbury Academic, out soon, one of the chapters is called Go Where the Smart People Are. So in all sincerity. And the chapter is sincerely about why that network is not a nice to do or a smart thing maybe to do. It's essential in leadership. And we apply it using the Virginia Satcher model of change, and then our change leadership model that we've penned from all these years doing these jobs and studying. And to be an effective change equation leader, hence the K-12 Change Equation podcast, we suggest to you humbly and proudly, though, with some evidence, that you got to go where the smart people are so you can get smarter. And that's what we believe people like you have afforded us in our journey, on our journeys to get better and learn better by going where the smart people are, because you were smart and you've collected us and you've put us in situations. And we mean that sincerely, not just trying to be nice. We mean it with absolute gratitude.
Mort, we have a brand new superintendent. We're a high school district here at Leiden, and we have 7 different elementary districts that feed their students into us. One of those 7 has a brand new superintendent that just started. And so I called him and we went out for breakfast 2 days ago. Exactly what you're talking about, building that. And the way Mike and I talk about it very simply is we say leadership is a team sport. We need each other to work together for us to be the most effective. Having done this for 16 years, 17 years, we've seen a lot of people come and go. And the people that flame out, that don't make it in the superintendency, are the ones who try to go it alone. They feel like they've got the big title. They need to have all the answers. None of us have all the answers, but all of us do. All of us have all the answers. And so if you can embrace that idea that school leadership is a team sport, not an individual sport, you're going to be much more successful.
Hey, Nick, I want to go back to your metaphor of the crow's nest. I never really thought of it that way, but I like it, and I'm going to give you credit when I use it all the time from now on. But We have my wife and I, my Debbie was a special ed teacher for a long time, middle school, and bless her heart, people used to say she was quadruply sainted. She was a middle school special ed teacher teaching math and married to me for 50 years. And it was the last piece that trumped the others. So, Nick, this idea, and then coming back to you, Mike, but this idea of being in the crow's nest and seeing out of the horizon, making sure that you're not a Titanic and hit that iceberg. Our middle daughter, Rachel, is a middle school special ed teacher, continued the family business. And she tells us how hard it is to be a teacher in today's classrooms. And so here you are up in that perch, looking out at the horizon, and all there's remarkable teachers in the classrooms and the staff that support them, the drivers in the buses, the secretaries, all of those people. And here you are in that crow's nest saying, here's what I see coming. How do you bring them with you?
I think that's a really difficult question. I think transparency and partnership, it's one thing for any one of us to be up there looking, but to tell people what you see and how that's guiding your decisions. So I think about the politics of today. I can go up in the crow's nest and say, all right, I see the immediacy of what we're dealing with, but boy, I certainly want to be on the right side of history. I can see where this is going 10 years from now. And how does that drive the decisions we make today? We look at, I think a great example is the teacher shortage. We're seeing statewide, nationwide. And so we had to have some hard conversations about how do we attract and retain the best possible employees, in our district. And so one of the things we did, which is super unique, is we built a preschool and daycare and found a partner and embedded it into one of our high schools. So if you want to come work here, you can also bring your kids here from, 6 weeks until 5 years old. They can go to work, to and from with you. You can visit them on your prep period, and it costs half of what childcare costs anywhere else. And so, that would be an example of like, all right, I understand down on the deck of the ship, I know there's burnout. I know you could work a lot of places, but we're gonna look out ahead and we're gonna do something that makes this place even better and different for you.
That's
Mike.
Beautiful answer. Mort, I'm going to answer with two different ways. One, culture, eat strategy for breakfast, Peter Drucker and so many others. Two is first who, then what. Let's get the right people on the bus, Jim Collins. In my journey, another real critical friend has been a gentleman called Brad Black. And he brought this human capital management firm, Ventures for Excellence, up to Human X Ventures. And over the years, Mort, and I swear by it, in each of my 3 districts where I've been privileged to be a superintendent, and the boards have supported this, in order to select one more like our best, we invest a ton on preparation for the selection of staff. So before we bring you in, you've got as a reduced bias selection process. We've used a little bit of computer-aided assistance. We use a little bit of telephone questioning. When we base it on 100 years of industrial organizational psychological research based on the Big 5 personality theory, where ultimately we're looking for talent. And it's talent and culture to build those teams and coalition. Brad Black just wrote a book about that, and we've used that as a cornerstone. Focus on the culture, focus on the talent, keep people. We want to select, we want to retain, and we want to develop and grow.
So for both of you, Carol Bazil, I think you both have either read of her or met her, talks about the next education workforce and said that idea that actually, when you talked about all these years since the nation at risk, that same year, that same generation, John Goodlad wrote the book called A Place Called School, where he opened the book by saying, I opened 110,000 classroom doors and could tell what decade I was in. And I don't know that it's changed much. So Carol Bazil and Arizona State University and the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College, Brett Madden, are talking about a different model. It's really hard to be that one teacher, one classroom, rather than like the medical model where you have other experts supporting you. Either of you playing with that or thinking about that as you look at that culture, that shift, and as you bring teachers into schools?
I'm going to ask Nick Mort to talk about the CoLab, where they are, in fact, doing this. And it was from an innovation incubator of teachers in Leiden. Nick, will you tell us about ninth grade a little bit, please?
Sure. This was a number of years ago, Mort. We had a group of teachers and we said, who would like to try something different? We didn't know what that meant, but we just created some time and space for them over the course of a year to just think differently about education. We didn't know what they were going to bring us, but we said, we'll support your ideas. We'll let you travel and go visit places and build something. And what it all ended up thinking is a program we call CoLab, which is an alternative version of freshman year that is de-siloed. It's, project-based learning. It is standards-based grading, earned honors credits. And instead of the model, the industrial model, go learn science for 45 minutes, then ring a bell, and then go to another place in the building, learn English for 45 minutes, ring a bell, go somewhere else. They've built a joined curriculum where the content is all married together with a group of teachers. And so you've got this block of time. And so if you want to say, all right, kids, for science today, we're going to go get on this bus and go take some samples at the local river. And then we're going to come back and we're going to look at the water samples. And your writing prompt for the day is going to be to talk about what you expected versus what you saw. And then we're going to learn about the local history of that river and how it impacted commerce. And that team is able to then bring all the concepts together instead of siloing them. Been wildly successful. It's super fun. And I think what we're learning is that the kids are not only learning the content, and they're doing just as well as the traditional model students on standardized assessments and whatnot, but they're getting collaboration skills, public speaking skills, community engagement skills that I think are more relevant than any content I can give them for future success. So, that we could show you videos and things about it, but it's a super, super cool program.
So Nick, you reminded me, I used to carry in my wallet a little statement, ask the teachers, as a reminder. And you just said that, when you're up in that perch or in that crow's nest, you see the iceberg coming and you see all the waves crashing against the bow of the boat. And as you could say, let's turn left to raise the mainsail, do all that other stuff. But you've also said, let's ask the teachers, because they're good people. They know what they're doing. They know what's good for kids. That's why they went into this profession. Did I summarize it accurately? Did I hear you accurately?
Yeah. I could go to a conference or go visit a school and come back and say, hey, everybody, the superintendent's got this big idea. Let's do it. That's not very often going to end well, right? Because there's no buy-in. But when they've built the program and all I'm doing is giving them the support and the resources and the permissions, that's a whole different equation, right? Now it's homegrown and there's buy-in already.
So Mike, and Nick just said it so beautifully, that idea of the K-12 change equation, it's not an algorithm. It's not a formula. It's not, when I was trained, the Flanders interaction analysis system or the effective schools movement, do these 7 things that everything will be swell. Well, we know that didn't work. That was like, we all tried it. So we need to add to our notes, Mike. It's like this question of what's part of the equation. Ask the teachers. They know. Go ahead. You want to add to that?
Honestly, if we had to distill what is going to work in leadership, here we're focusing on K-12 change. We can talk about society as well. It's Tim McGraw's song, Be Humble and Kind. And I really think, and Nick models this beautifully, Mort, that humility of, yeah, he's smart and he knows a lot and he's experienced a lot and he's got a really cool body of work that's really, really impactful for children and adults. He's also humble enough to know he doesn't know everything. And he needs to know, and he needs to ask his teachers and ask the students, ask the parents, ask the culinary arts, food service employees. And he also needs to be kind. And kindness is a strength. Monday and Tuesday, I was at a conference here in Chicago, and one of our incredible facilitators said, these are not soft skills. These are sophistication skills. And I loved how elegantly she said that, because critical thinking, teamwork, problem solving. It's really be humble and be kind, because we are in this together. And the bottom line is we're going to be in this together. And if I had a formula, it wouldn't be that fun. So let's just keep working together and building it as we go. It's also the gardener's metaphor. You've got to cultivate your soil. You got to plant your seeds. In our work sometimes, Mort, as the farmer, as the gardener, we may not see the actual tree, because the tree comes after we've left and we've done all this work. However, that tree's been growing even if we can't see it. And the fruits that it will bear are because of our impact and our legacy. And we have to believe that. And a lot of it is on a prayer and a wing. You know, we're on the shores of Lake Michigan and we see the waves crashing in. And again, Nick wants to be in a ship. I want to be that lighthouse to pave way light that someone can continue to follow long after I'm gone.
So, Nick and Mike, with about 5 or 6 minutes left in our conversation, which can go on forever because I think the two of you are so brilliant and so successful, I want to go back to that crow's nest, the waves crashing on shore, and talking, Nick, with what you described. You know, tell them what you see. How do you talk to your board, to your community, to your staff? 4 million fewer kids are going to attend public schools this year than 10 years ago. 4 million less. And the $9 billion, or is it $7 billion just cut from the federal budget for education? The Department of Education is changing, if not going to be eliminated entirely. And so there's huge waves crashing against the bow, crashing against the shore. It's raining really hard out there and your gardens are eroding, Mike. What do you do with your board and your community and staff to stay the course, to keep them calm, to keep them focused? What's your conversation?
So we do the best we can, and we listen, and we speak. And we speak with clarity, coherence, respect, and conviction. And 1, 2, 3, even 20 folks who disagree, we hear them, we respect them. We don't, though, have the tail wag the dog. We still go for that 85%, 80%. We are in a position, and it's a bit more contentious in my communities than in Nick's. I'll be quite candid. Nick knows this. I share all the communications and things with him and get advice. Part of it is tell the truth. Part of it is listen. And part of it is stay true to the core values and be willing to say, thank you for your disagreement. And I mean that sincerely. I respectfully disagree. Here are the points. Here's the difference. At the end of the day, though, I'm empowered to manage and lead. And we're going to do it together on our shared values. But a few dissenters and a few disagreeers will always be heard and treated with dignity. They, though, won't be the one loud voice that changes the entire course. That's not how it's going to work. And you need strength and courage. That's my response.
Nick?
A couple fundamental questions that I wrestle with all the time. Is school a noun or a verb? Right? And is school a building or a collection of experiences? Like, I think for so long, we've thought of school as the noun, this building. It's a place kids go. Where teachers teach and kids learn. That's what school is. And as I wrestle with the complexity of what we're trying to do for kids today, I've really had to accept this fact that school is much more amorphous, right? It's much more about all of the things we can do for kids. You know, if you start to layer on internships and experiences and all the other things. So how do you do that with a board of education in a community who knows school through the lens that they experienced it? And so, through strategic planning, vision and mission, I know it's kind of hokey, but our vision statement here is a very simple one. It's doing what's best for the kids. And so we put students on our board of education. So yeah, in Illinois, we have 7 members. So we have the 7 elected people, but then we put one kid from each high school at the table They receive the same communications. They're part of every conversation and every decision that the board makes. So the end users are sitting at the table with the adults, driving the decisions that we make for what's best for kids. It's not always easy, but I think symbolically and, and on a day-to-day basis, it's really important to who we are and how we hit that mark.
Neither of you used a word, though I think both of you live and breathe this word: hope, optimism. Are you optimistic? Are you hopeful about the future of public education?
I'm completely optimistic that public education will continue to be the solid core foundation of our democratic way of life in the United States. And I'm hopeful that we in public education can build a bigger bridge and coalition to those who are choosing private education, independent schools, micro schools, homeschooling. So together we can say this is the 22nd century view. Let's work together. I'm an advocate for public education, not at the expense of or the exclusion of other types of education. I'm an advocate for education. Let's work together. And maybe that's our new hope and our new promise, is to work together and build those coalitions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are certainly frustrations I have. As I see outbreaks of measles across the country, I'm like, wait a minute, we already solved that one. How are we back here again? As I see our students losing some of their benefits and ability to get food and and other resources, I worry about our families, but I am hopeful because we've always been a place of hope. We're a place that'll take in any kid, do anything we can for any kid, any family, and I think that's always going to be our place. So yeah, I'm always hopeful.
Do either of you know the core word for education? And I'm not a Latin or Greek scholar, but it's educare. Do you know what that means?
No, I know John Le Carre. I'm sorry, I know John Le Carre.
No. No, it means to lead forth. And it's like education truly, I think, is at the forefront of culture and society. And public education, like you just said, it is at the core of our democracy. It helps us sustain and enhance our democracy. And I think that sense of hope that you both just shared, I think, is a wonderful message for your communities. Sure, we're going to have issues. And so when I always kid Layla when she's on with me, she uses the word unprecedented. I said, well, wait a second. Do you imagine what it was like being a superintendent in World War II? Can you imagine what it was like being a superintendent after the shootings of Kent State? Or, I mean, you go on, or during, you mentioned 1954 in Brown versus Topeka, or 1957 Little Rock 9. Dyken Ravage, wrote about the Troubled Crusade. There's never been a golden age in education. I truly do believe that we could, with you folks at leadership, whether you're still in the seat, Mike, or not, truly have an impact and continue to stay that course and keep the ship going in the right direction, Nick. So we end our podcast with what I call the now what, so what parts of what's going on. And so, Nick and Mike, for both of you, it's a question of now, what do you see coming up? And so what do you think we should do? And I know we've hit a lot of those questions, but both of you could just summarize the now what, so what for your leadership, for your communities.
Lean into the power that generative artificial intelligence tools, when married to and tied with safety, data privacy, ethical use, to actually help each and every child individualize, personalize, differentiate, have high rigor, high expectations. Lean in, because it's not only here, we are going to reshape what it will be.
Mort, I think my career has taught me that there's a pendulum of things that go back and forth that we deal with. And in this moment, I think we have to be careful not to overreact to some of the things we're dealing with. We need to weather the storm and wait for the pendulum to start to come back and be the steady hand through that. Because I think we deal with a lot of very reactive people, whether it's students, staff, community members, board members. It's inherent in some people's nature to be very reactive in the moment. And we need to be that steady hand that gets us through this.
I appreciate both of you, and I hope your communities appreciate you, even in turbulent times when the waters are rough. I think both of you are remarkable leaders and have influenced not only policy and practice in Illinois, but across the country. And on behalf of all those kids out there and all the communities who are impacted by your wisdom and leadership, thank you. And thank you for being part of our discussion today.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mort. Nick, thank you for being here.
Always good to see you, my friends. Thanks for the opportunity today, Mort.
Take care.